Hey guys, this is Tyler here, and I want to discuss with everyone here an issue, and this unfortunately has been growing for many men, and it's gotten really bad actually in recent years. And what the issue is depression. Any country, depression obviously, depression's always existed, and I think it's really been compounded when we look at countries like in the U.S. U.S. obviously has had a lot of problems in the past 20 years. Military rates of depression is very high. A lot of guys have PTSD when they come back from the military, from a war conflict. There's a lot of police officers who have depression, and many other professions. People in the flight industry, air traffic controllers, medical profession. It's everywhere, honestly. And there's a lot of people that self-medicate, which can work, and other times it doesn't. And then there's guys who have extreme forms of depression where they consider just ending their life. It's very unfortunate, honestly, because I think long-term it's not worth it. And if you let yourself submit to ending your life for depression, it's not the right way to approach problems. Of course. In recent times, obviously, we've had all these lockdowns in countries, and what we've noticed is a lot of military guys, especially guys who are in conflicts, have very high, elevated rates of depression right now. A lot of police have high rates. In the last, what happened last Wednesday at Congress, when the riots happened, people got into like the Congress building, everything. One of those police officers who was involved in this situation, they were trying to stop the riots. He actually just ended his life like a few days ago. It's very interesting when I look at this. It just tells me that like how depressed and how unhappy a lot of these guys are in those professions, and they do not want to be in those professions. Many of them cannot express it. They're fed up with it. They're probably fed up with the government, fed up with the policies they have to push, and just simply cannot deal with it. And these guys, of course, they end their lives. No one would ever know it. No one would have known. This guy would be like, after this whole situation, was just feeling like terrible. And he probably had been feeling terrible. And this was kind of the last straw for him. There may have been some penalty for this situation getting this bad. The police department he worked for may have punished these guys. It's difficult to say. The guy, men on a whole, in America and in other countries, have just feel terrible. And I can speak better for guys in the U.S. We're at rates now where more than ever before guys are ending their lives. It's not being published in media. Better Bachelor, the YouTuber, just spoke about this recently. And they always discuss the rate of women ending their lives, never discuss the rate of men ending their lives. Ironically, even though it's as bad as it's been in history. It's important, obviously, to realize what's causing this to happen and how to fix this and to push forward so that you don't feel as bad and just to overcome. Yeah, self-medication can work. I think at points people may need to take like some prescriptions, even a little alcohol here and there if you're not using it to completely over-medicate is all right. If it helps you relax, if it helps you feel a little more tranquil, I think it's all right. But if you have an issue with depression that just persists and continues, maybe it's something in your life, however you're living. And unfortunately, people are quick to say that, like this guy that was in the police force who ended his life, they tell these guys that they're not strong enough. Maybe he was the wrong guys that said, oh, you're just too weak, you have to toughen up, or you have to do this or that. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. I mean, if this was how bad the guy was feeling, he probably should have, quit the job and gone into a different profession or something. There must have been something that he could have done. And I think in the near future, especially in some countries with all the lockdowns, it's just going to worsen, honestly. Like in countries like the U.S., and people guys got to be aware of this. Recently I saw a YouTuber, he lives in the Philippines, and actually discussed how he was almost on the verge of ending his life. He was from Kentucky in the U.S., and this fellow was in his 60s, and he ended up actually buying a one-way plane ticket to Philippines like 2 years ago. and decided he was just going to change his country. Maybe he would feel better if he moved to a different country. Immediately his life did improve, and now he's in a better state of mind. And this is another possibility, is that you could maybe have to move to a different place. You don't necessarily have to move out of the country. Maybe moving to a different city or region of the country might be an option if possible. Because sometimes the environment, I think the location of where you're living, it does have an impact. And I know some people say it's not greener on the other side. This paradigm isn't true. I sometimes say that it is true. The people who say this paradigm's not true understand the period this paradigm came from. This was a paradigm very old. It's not green on the other side. We're talking like 1950s here. We're not talking about the current madness that's happening in some countries, extreme madness in places. And this is why I say people are totally welcome to have their opinions, but there's some truth to that paradigm in certain contexts. And people have to realize that with some of the paradigms, they came from a different era. Those were during eras where overall societies were relatively good. It's not like now. This isn't like, we're not talking about the level of restriction on people more than it's ever been in history. And so people who say it's not green on their side, yeah, maybe. And I also ask people, what's that paradigm referring to, as in a different city of the country or like different city of the state? I don't think that paradigm was necessarily referring to being in a different country. Big difference there. And so I point that out. In some cases, yeah, it's probably true. The paradigm does work. But I've seen, and I've known of plenty of cases where it worked just fine, where this situation did, by moving somewhere else, it long term, it put the person in a better state of mind. Also remember that the paradigms, these people who call these paradigms like, they believe the paradigms, like this last example, I think many times it's more reference towards women to females, because a female, they may go and live somewhere else, but why are they moving abroad? Why are they going to a different part of the world? Usually it's not for the same reasons as men. Maybe it is partially, but I think maybe the people that say the paradigm is true are usually more of women, because I think often they're better off if they do try stay closer to where they've grown up in most cases. But the high rates of depression, of course, have skyrocketed the opiate abuse in like the past 5 to 10 years. And I believe the rate's going to continue to go up. I believe also for women it's going to really skyrocket, as it already has been, in the next 10 to 15 years. Some people have asked me actually for stock recommendations, and I would look at pharmaceutical stocks that are based in this area, actually. That it's long-term stocks. That would be a simple investment recommendation. Opiate use, though, very high. Very hard to get off opiates, and this is something you have to understand. If you are in this depression mindset and you're substituting, like using opiates, if it does make you feel better, if this is like your long-term solution, like you're using this cocktail of medication to get you through life, it may not be any better than not using the medication at all, because then you're just going to become dependent. Your tolerance is going to build up. And truly, your like environment that you're living in may actually play a role. I can say for myself, I feel much happier, honestly, being in Eastern Europe than when I was living in Chicago. When I lived in Chicago, I mean, I was economically doing just fine. I drove a very nice car and I had a pretty good lifestyle, but I mean, there's many other like parts of the environment that play into how you feel. I think in many Western countries, the tie of culture and people's day-to-day life is hurting them, and just not being able to express your opinions on matters is another problem. Especially men now are not able to really express their opinions on situations, and just the fact that there are a lot of freedoms that people just either aren't experiencing, or like in the police officer's case, they're having to suppress other people's freedom. And people can argue this. suppressing people's freedom in some of these cases. There's no question. And I'm sure some of these guys feel very guilt-ridden. Some of them obviously went overseas and were in the military, supposedly defending freedoms, and then coming back home and totally violating people's freedom. And so for some of them, I'm sure they feel completely horrible having to do this. And it's obviously we see the outcome of this. Depression is something that you can certainly get through. It, like in other things of life, it's often a cycle. And also, I think a lot of people have had more time on their hands. Sometimes if people have more time and less stress, I think, can actually produce more depression than less time and more stress, as odd as that seems, because you can't think about as much. When you're more when you're more busy and you're grinding, often you can't think about these issues often, and you're just focused on day-to-day life. And this is the difference here. But if you're in a position where it doesn't go away, and you're considering maybe just changing location, this might be your best option. Change your city, change your country, look into what you can do. Don't let the environment or people, whatever it may be, just don't let that impact you to the point of doing anything disastrous. Because I suspect sometimes the mainstream, like especially in Western countries, almost wants guys to do this, as sick as it sounds. And so by doing this, you're conceding defeat. It's better not to, and just, as Andrew Henderson says, go to where you're treated best and try and make a better life. So give me your feedback below here, and thank you.